This is an intimate conversation series with millionaires and billionaires who moved the world, not just about how they built their wealth, but about who they had to become because of it. Because money amplifies what you've always been. This is the Inner Circle. Let's begin. Welcome to the Inner Circle podcast. Today in this episode, we're interviewing Luke Kayyem. He motivates men in particular in terms of leadership, faith, and business. Let me introduce Luke. Hey, Luke.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming here. Could you tell us a little bit of what you are doing today in terms of working with the men in our community?
Absolutely. So I coach men of all ages, from teenagers to those who have retired in business.
Amazing.
14 to 65 and above. But the majority of people that I do work with are men in that 35 to 55-year-old range.
Yeah.
And we call it peak performance life coaching. So it encompasses physical strength, health is wealth, mindset, emotional resilience, oftentimes dealing with trauma or something like a tragedy, a loss of a loved one, a wife, a child, or just a reinvention in terms of business or what they're going through in this season of life. But it's all encompassing and really focuses on the individual in growth.
Amazing.
And every area of their life. We don't want any areas that are blind or open or gapped. We want to fill everything. And I often use the term unrecognizable is really the goal of working with any individual.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. One of the things that I want to tell the audience is you have such a beautiful journey, right? For you to be able to get here to motivate other men. So let's take a deep dive of your past, if you can. How you got here, like what did you have to go through to share?
That's a great way of framing it, a beautiful journey. I don't know if I've ever quite heard it like that, but thank you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hardship and challenges, which really did shape the way that I live and the way that I coach and the way that I parent.
Right.
And it wasn't always easy. I'll give you the sort of short version of this, but I grew up in scarcity. And although we weren't poor or homeless, there was a constant sort of fear base in my childhood. I grew up around women, my mom, my grandma, my great aunt. I didn't have a positive male role model. I didn't have a leader. I didn't have a superhero that was my own. And so I got away with getting into a lot of trouble at a young age and didn't really have a guide to kind of bring me back.
Right.
And that carried on with me in through my middle school and high school years. And I had a lot of loss because my mom had me at 45 as an only child, single parent. Everyone was old and people started to die. And I started to lose the people that I loved the most at a young age. And that only magnified the scarcity. But that scarcity and what I would call the fixed mindset was really my entire upbringing. I compared myself to my friends or to people I knew who had two parents in the home, who had consistency, who had discipline. And instead of understanding the fixed versus growth mindset, I just felt that I was cursed and that I was born into this and there was anything could have been done about it. And so that's how I lived. I really did live like nothing truly mattered in the long term. I didn't care about how I was living. I started drinking when I was 14 and driving at that age as well. And I got into a lot of trouble.
So you were influenced a lot by outside friends, right?
Yes. And I was always what I would consider to be a leader, but not leading the right way. Not having a foundation based off of health and fitness and expansion and growth, and even faith. You know, it really didn't exist. And because I got into trouble and because I didn't have the right support system, it only magnified. And it got really bad in high school. I played sports, but You know, I barely graduated from high school. I dropped out of college my freshman year, and I lived this lifestyle, which at the time was not intrinsically motivating.
Yeah.
It was always looking for something outside, you know, a party, a nightclub, hanging out, doing things that really didn't have any great return.
Just a quick dopamine hit.
That's it. That's
Right.
it. Yeah. And thank goodness we weren't in, you know, today's times.
Yeah.
Because things might have been a lot worse with social media
Right.
and the comparison game.
Yeah. So for someone, you spoke a lot in your shows about growing up fatherless. So at what point, like for someone who to come to you and say, hey, I feel really lost. I don't have a father figure. What's your advice to them from your experiences?
Had I had half the father that I wanted, I wouldn't be half the man that I am today. That's a Tony Robbins quote that when I first heard it, you know, I almost started to cry because how powerful that statement was. And teaching men the frameworks, the systems, the standards, the structure, and strategy to be unstoppable. Language didn't even exist when I was growing up. So when I hear a young man that I'm working with is growing up without a dad, right away I'm not just bought into the mission, but I feel that it is my true life's calling, is to be able to serve and to give all men, but especially the younger ones, the teenagers who are going through this time period that I recall so, you know, close to home of how hard it was. And not just on me, but how hard it was on my mom and the people who did want to help me.
Right.
It is something that I believe all men will face and struggle in their lifetime, whether they had a father or not. What is the internal monologue like? And so those men who grow up without fathers, oftentimes it's not guaranteed that they're going to become great fathers themselves.
Right.
But the ones who do understand the importance and the value of not just having that, they didn't have it, but becoming that. Right? So I have a personal mission statement. It's my I am statement. I teach men how to craft their own. I am the man, husband, father, leader, and coach I always wanted in my own life. And it's not a way for me to brag or boast. It's a way for me to get centered and come back to what is important in my life.
Yeah.
If I show up as a model or version of me that doesn't fit that sentence, then I'm not me. I'm being an imposter. And possibly I'm being driven by outside influences less than what my true core values are and who I want to be. That's a legacy statement that if I get sideways or off track, or if I start to chase something that doesn't have that same significance or value, it can regroup me. It's also a way that I can, over time, show up as my best self in raising my kids. They're both adults now, 18 and 19. But when they were 6 and 8 and 10, and I was frustrated or, you know, short because men haven't been given a book on how to parent or father, it would ground me and it would reconnect me with why I'm here.
Right.
I would have never wanted an angry, short, upset, pissed off, triggered, drunk version of me to be in my life.
Yeah.
So the last thing I would ever want to be is that version to my kids or to anybody else in my life.
So with the affirmation statement, like how often do you say it to yourself? Do you do it as a routine every morning, or do you say it whenever you feel that need of reframing?
Yeah, so I've watched quite a few of your episodes, and I know that coaching and mentorship and having guides in your life, you ask that question to a lot of people. So, you know, I probably say it a lot more out loud and in person on stage or even in this kind of environment more than I think about it. But I thought about it for many years. So hiring a coach about 10 years ago, that was one of our writing assignments, right, is to craft this personal mission statement, the affirmation statement to, you know, live by. We wrote it down, we put it in our, on a piece of paper, we folded it up and we put it in our wallet. And it lived with me for a few years until I realized it was something that I just knew deep down in my heart. It's not perfection, but if I'm angry, upset, short, triggered, pissed off, whatever the mood might be, it curbs it back into a centered place where I can look at things much differently than however I'm feeling in that moment. And you don't have teenagers yet, but they're coming.
Yes.
There is an underlining frustration that will happen with all parents during those teenage years, where they're not doing it intentionally. They're doing it because that's part of their life, growing up and growing through it. And so I've been super blessed to have two really, really great kids. But my wife and I have obviously spent a lot of time and energy, and it's not insured, it's not guaranteed. But a lot of what I teach, what I coach, and what I speak, they've lived through their entire life.
Yeah.
You know, and my daughter will say to me, and has even on stage before, I don't need a coach, I need my dad. And so in that process, I've also shifted how I parent them.
Right.
Because they don't want to hear the motivation. Right?
They can tell, right? They can tell which side.
They don't want to always be inspired or motivated, especially by their dad. Sometimes they just want to know dad is there.
Right.
And so I've learned how to be a better father through being a better listener and understanding what is it my kids really need. So one of my coaching principles for parents and for fathers is always meeting your kids where they are at whatever stage of life they're in. My 5 and 7-year-old fathering doesn't work for 10 and 13.
Right. They're always changing.
Always changing. And it definitely won't work for 18 and 19-year-olds. You know, so learning that in real time then becomes a resource that I can utilize. So much of my coaching philosophy and principles comes down from what I've learned into what now I've applied and what I teach. It's a case study.
Yeah.
Right. I'm the first father of the future in this program that we built on how to empower and inspire other men to have the greatest leadership position they ever will in life, which is being a parent.
Yes, it's incredible. So to take a dive back, you mentioned when you grew up, you came into this world with a fixed mindset that you had to really expand into how you operate and think today. Was there an epitome moment that transformed how you thought from a fixed to a growth mindset? And was there an individual that made that impact, or what happened during those times? At what age?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, as it kind of frames, you know, where and how I got to this place. There was 3 of those moments in my life, those transformational sort of, if I could look back in time in the linear timeline, transformed everything I feel, think, and how I behave in life. The first one was my father, who I have always called a phantom, not a ghost, because I've never met him, never seen him in my whole life. Although he existed, he wasn't real to me. And so in 8th grade, a very pivotal time in any young man's age, I was 13, he was reaching out to me from prison and wanted a relationship with me. And my mom warned me, and I bought into it. I believed it. And when he got out, the promises that he had made to come and meet me and see me, they fell short. And so that was the first moment where it didn't actually work well. It was the exact opposite. And so I regressed. I took the backstage. I didn't care because it hurt me so much.
Right.
The second phase of that is when my mom passed away when I was 24. And it was very unexpected. She had been my mom and my dad my whole life. She was the number one most important, person in my whole life up until that point. And she died unexpectedly and had a stroke in her home. And I found her. And so only child, single parent, you see your mom, who you had just been planning sort of long-term care, at 64 years old, unexpectedly, pass away. And then the third one was having kids and becoming a man that I was not proud of. Becoming a father, and I wasn't proud of the man that I was at that time. And so massive, significant change was needed. But if I look back on those moments, a lot of people will, feel that hurt, that pain, that agony. I've learned to use it as a weapon and in a positive light, right? Again, going back to that Tony Robbins quote, it really did frame who I am and how I show up for people by this man never showing up for me. losing my mom at that time in my life, not understanding it, has made me appreciate my life and everyone's life even more. I don't waste time or energy on things that have little to no meaning, and I don't rush in the sense that, my mom passed away unexpectedly, and you never want that for anybody, but what it makes you realize is the time that you have with the people and the time that we have here on earth. I've given 3 eulogies. I've lost many clients. I get the phone call, and it's a hard thing, but I've learned to appreciate it, knowing that I've put myself in a position where I get to be that for somebody else.
Right.
And then, having kids, that one was a big one for me. My son changed my life in the sense that I didn't really care about anyone else in that time in my life. I was just very self-centered. And my daughter changed how I lived my life. I quit drinking a month after she was born, about 18 years ago now. And that has also become a secret weapon for peak performance and for teaching men how to live an optimal life. Alcohol is simply just, it's a setback that you decide to do every time you do it.
Through those moments, those are very, very tough rock bottom moments. How did you talk yourself out of it? How did you even have the strength to, dig yourself out of that mindset, have the motivation to move forward and just live life normally?
I don't know if I did. I don't think I did. I used alcohol for the first 2 of those major milestones to kind of, minimize the feeling or the pain. And then by the time the 3rd one came with my daughter or my son, I was in the game of coaching, training, and development. I had been a fitness guy right out of college, dropping out. I got right into the fitness industry and saw great success. We opened one of the first CrossFit gyms in America, let alone Arizona, the CrossFit Scottsdale, and that was a big part of my journey. And ultimately, physical fitness, training, doing hard things was the beginning of the journey. And after doing that for enough years, realizing that was very one-dimensional. I used to joke around and say that I could make it rain coconut water, but I was missing something.
Right.
And I also wanted to spend more time with my kids and not be so attached to the brick and mortar of a fitness gym. We had opened up several under our own Sick Fit umbrella, which was like a counterculture brand to CrossFit, long before Orange Theory and F45 were on the map.
Right.
But in that process, and I still have clients from there that are working with me in the new program, I didn't have what I wanted. And what I mean by that is I felt like there was something missing from my skills. And I couldn't coach someone else on what their gap was if I didn't know what mine was.
Right.
And so physical training, doing hard things, races, competitions, bodybuilding, you name it, that became easy.
Yes.
And what I realized that the gap was mental and emotional and even spiritual. And so those pillars came later. And once I began to realize that there is so much more than just the physical side of us, we need to grow, it changed everything. It changed the way not only I lived, but it changed the way that I teach.
In your journey in finding the other elements and pillars, aside from fitness, what was... where did you even start? You just, this is missing. Where do I find it? Did you find coaches, or can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything I do now has a framework, and that helps what I would call the masculine mind keep things very organized, right, and structured. Here's the step-by-step process on how to get fit, on how to get healthy, on how to get off, drugs, alcohol, sedation. Well, I had gone through those sort of courses and classes and learning more. It was easy, right? My physical body would only go so far, and I finished 4th place in 4 CrossFit competitions in a row.
Wow.
And what that meant for me was that I couldn't finish. I was missing something. And so I seeked out mental toughness. I found the military. I found Navy SEAL training. I found coaches and courses and classes that a civilian like myself could immerse him into and come out of it on the other side a little bit mentally tougher and sharper.
Right.
And so I did that for a while, and now I had physical and mental, and realized that there was a hole in my emotional. I hadn't dealt with my mom, my dad, anything from my past.
Right.
I just worked through it and hoped that it went away. And realized, hey, maybe I need some therapy. Maybe I need some additional coaching in some of these areas that wasn't natural to me. Right. And so we opened up those doors, and growth started to happen. And then I started coaching a couple of pastors from a local gym. And they invited me to church. And although I had been, I wouldn't say raised in the church, it had not been something foreign to me.
Yeah.
I went to church a few times when my kids were young. I went a few times, like the Easter and Christmas sort of service.
Right.
I started working with them, and we were giving each other something that neither of us had, right? I could give them sort of this sharp mindset to like attack. And they gave me the spiritual sort of verbiage language or nomenclature on how to deal with some things, some wisdom that I didn't have.
Right.
That door opened, and it led me to getting baptized and having faith become an intricate part of my coaching and training. It's not religion. It's not religious. It's more about faith and understanding that if you try to do everything on your own, you're going to end up empty. And if you're chasing money and things and outcomes and awards, you're going to end up empty. And so the faith component for me was the last pillar, but it was also the one that I couldn't create a framework behind.
Right.
It wasn't up to me. It wasn't man-made. Right. And in that process, my daughter's faith journey has inspired me to continue to grow. She was born with Jesus in her heart.
Yeah.
And that has really helped me understand that I need more and more practice and more work in that pillar in order to grow, but not just grow to receive something, to grow to be something.
Right.
Be free from fear, anxiety, pressure, stress, and know that God's got you. And something so simple has now become a philosophy of mine in my coaching and mentoring.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think faith is, there's so many types of denominations, even in Christianity, and different types of faith. So if someone comes to you with a different faith, how do you speak with them in terms of being relatable about God, and then also connecting to them with their own faith?
Beautiful question. I have lots of Jewish family and friends. I have Buddhist coaches in my life. For me, I share my story and use it as leverage on how to find your own success. You have to identify what success means to you.
Right.
For me, I explain what I did and didn't do and what worked and didn't work. I had studied Buddhism for a few years under the Phil Jackson premise, right, of not being attached to things. And it worked out really well. I could understand it. I could read about it. I spent some time in some Buddhist ceremonies, and it was great. And then as the door started to open and realize, like, there's a lot out there that I don't need religion, I need faith. And how do you get that, right? I'm not one of these guys who's going to say, follow me, do this, right? You have to do what works for you. But if you do nothing, that no longer works. So you've got to do something. I teach meditation, breath, prayer. Prayer is the basis of gratitude. Right? People are afraid to pray, but if you can practice gratitude like the journal that I brought, it's a step-by-step system on how to improve your faith, right? If I'm grateful for something, then I know I have everything I need right now. I won't be chasing something that has little to no meaning.
And that's one of the things that I speak with a lot of very successful people that's been in this show. And I believe one of the guests, he mentioned, the same thing that you mentioned. Hey, after success, if you're building it upon materialistic things, you feel some sort of emptiness. And I think a lot of men faces that because men are providers historically, right? So they grow up with a sense of like what men should be, vulnerability, things like that. So when you teach men and they come to you and they say, "Hey, I have everything, like that I've ever wanted, but I feel so lost." What's the first thing that you tell them that is like that could help them?
When was the last time that you prayed? That's the question I ask them, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes it could be, it's been a long time. Yeah. Well, what's stopping you from that, right? Because I have kids who are grown up now and I've gone through these conversations with them, a lot of what I ask them works for us, for the adults, right? And so one time we were in church and someone was complaining about the pastor or the service, right? And so I go back to thinking, feeling, and processing, and my takeaway was never let the message or the messenger affect your relationship with God. Meaning, don't get stuck in religion. Don't get stuck in church. Don't get stuck in the Bible. Get stuck in gratitude and prayer. And then once you exhaust all that, if you're still in that phase where you want more, go and journey these different places or things. But don't base your entire faith practice on the last service you went to at a church and you didn't love it. Because if you do that, you're going to feel empty and you're going to say, well, I tried church and it didn't work. I tried reading the Bible. I couldn't get into it. Okay. Well, let's attack it 10 different ways. Let's do these 10 things. Actually, you know what? You're stubborn. Let's go for a hike, right? Let's go hike Camelback. Let's put a vest on. Let's do your age and push-ups. Okay, great. Now, you thinking better? Yes. Okay, let's breathe. All right, great. How do you feel? I feel better. Awesome. Can we be grateful for how you feel? Yes. Great. What if you just did what you needed to become closer to God? Oh, I never thought of it like that. Well, that's helped me. Right?
Yeah.
You know, you spend 40 to 70 hours in your office a week. When was the last time you went for a walk in nature? When was the last time you stood out in the rain? You're not putting yourself into the environment to be closer to God. And you're expecting God to tap on your shoulder and say, hey, what are you doing, man? Come do this with me. Everybody's journey is different in that, but I look at it similar to your mindset, your emotional intelligence, and your fitness. It is a muscle that we must work. And if that muscle doesn't work because it never has, or it doesn't work because you were injured by using that muscle in the past, you were injured by another human.
Yeah, it caused a drama.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So just different angles of asking the same question to get to a better response or get them to acknowledge maybe there's a gap there. How do you fill that gap, right? Now, somebody will come to me, 1 in 100, and say, I don't believe in God. I don't want anything to do with God. Okay, great. Can you be grateful for where you are today? Sure. Okay. Well, that's your starting point. I don't need to enforce anything. But I can tell you that my life, my kids' life, my community's life, my future generation's life has become better because of making that decision to not just accept things the way that they are, but to do something about it. And that's where faith starts for anyone.
Right. That's. I think I've never heard of that. In terms of gratitude, you know, anyone can be have gratitude. Yeah. I think that's an incredible way to look at it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
One of the things I think society has put on men, and you probably see this coaching hundreds of men, right? Is like men have to be masculine but not show too much vulnerability. And that's one of the topic that I've always been so curious about is the vulnerability. Like, how do you coach men to be like, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be soft in certain aspects. You don't have to be tough all the time, but you can still be masculine. Yeah. Can you talk about the topic of masculinity?
Yeah, that's a great one. So underneath this suit is a lot of tattoos and some muscles, right? I consider myself to be a real man. And I say that in the sense of physically dominating. I can protect, preserve, and serve my family. I train combat, martial arts, tactical shooting training. Like on paper, I consider myself to be a savage, and in a good way. But if I allow that to dominate everything in my life, I will be unhealthy towards those things. And so there has to be a polarity in masculinity training. Most men think I just need to dominate the dojo or look a certain way, and that's going to help me. And it might, but I am so much more looking towards fluidity and balance, and knowing that if I just, I did that for a long time. That masculinity training became very unhealthy, and it dominated everything in my life. And so having an understanding of how to do both, right? This is, I often use this language in my discoveries, right? I believe in therapy. I think it's beautiful, right? To unpack some things from your past. This is the visual representation of therapy. This is men's life coaching, right? You need a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Too much of one, unhealthy. And the way that I approach anything in terms of health or balance for me is that balance comes in the extremes, okay? I am not straight down the middle. Over here, this is getting up at 3:34 in the morning and training, 5 days a week.
Right.
Over here, this is stopping and pausing and saying prayer before a meal with my family. Over here, punching a bag, right? Hitting it as hard as I can and releasing some of that rage.
Yes.
Over here is having a conversation with a therapist or a counselor or a guide that I'm sad right now. And I don't know why, but here's what I think. And through that, men will have a greater understanding of who they are and not let their image dominate their actions.
Yeah.
Because if I allow myself to do that, I'm going to look like one of these Instagram, 50-year-old guys who is showing off their six-pack and their car. But that's also very one-dimensional, right? But I'm never going to be a guy over here who's just talking about his emotions constantly and doesn't take any action.
Right.
So it's different for every individual, but for me, I find, harmony in the balance of the extremes, right? I'm going to eat a certain way. I might eat just meat for 8 weeks, and then I'm not going to eat. I'm going to fast for 5 days.
Yeah.
Too much of one of any of those is unhealthy. And so constantly working on the balance between them so that you can be multidimensional, so that you can show up to a boardroom, execute a high-level keynote or a podcast, and then you can go home and listen to your daughter, because she's scared that she's going off to college.
Yeah.
And how do you hold space in both of those environments? It starts from within and taking inventory on what is dominating you, right? What dominates your life, right? What you focus on, you feel.
Yeah.
And that's a huge one for me, is to realize I went through a phase, now I'm being vulnerable, of about 1.5 years when my daughter was 15 to 16 and a half, where I went from being her best friend in the world to the guy who lives downstairs. And what I mean by that was I had to adjust my expectation. My teenage daughter did not want her dad to be the guy that she hangs out with all the time. So it made me sad. And I remember being around her and getting emotional that she was no longer this little girl.
Yeah.
That was a great feeling. But when it became unhealthy and she's like, Dad, you're crying again? Come on, dude. Then it was like, all right, well, I need to adjust, right? I need to switch back. And now when people are like, your daughter's going to Florida to go play college soccer, University of Tampa, are you sad? No, I was, right? I've purged that. I've released it. I've let go. Hey, are you sad about your mom? No, I dealt with that. I purged that, right?
Right.
Healing is a lifelong process. It's not a one and done. Right. But once we become in tune and self-aware and we know the work that we're doing on ourselves is leading us somewhere, we can look at it and say, is this relationship with X healthy or unhealthy? And if it's unhealthy, how do I shift or adjust? Not everybody needs to quit drinking.
Yeah.
But if you've become unhealthy in your relationship with alcohol, You need to be the one that's self-aware enough to make those necessary shifts and adjustments.
Right. In your relationship with alcohol, since we've touched on that now, you mentioned that was your coping mechanism.
Yeah.
For a while. So what made you stop it?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was the adjustment that...
Well, there was a time where I got into a lot of trouble legally in my early 20s to mid-20s.
Uh-huh.
And then when my daughter was born, you know, what she doesn't realize and what most people don't realize is if you let your life just happen by default, the things that are happening will just continue to happen, right? And so had I continued to default to the system or the standard or the operating way that I was, I would have just said, hey, this is who I am, right? But I didn't accept that. And so my daughter's born, and I have one of those aha moments where I realized I did not want her ever to see that version of me. And so my kids have never seen me have a drink. They've never seen me be drunk. They've never smelled alcohol on me. I've never gotten angry unintentionally, right? All the things that happen to somebody when they drink, none of those things existed. And for me, breaking the generational curse was so important in my life that I didn't pass any of this on, that I made that decision.
Wow.
And through the help of a lot of different sort of systems and playbooks, right? AA can work for a lot of people. Church faith can work for a lot of people. You need 20 different things. If we were talking about business specifically, you said, well, how did you become successful in business? Here's the 22 different steps in my playbook. How'd you get sober? Here's the 10, right? Pick one. But it comes back to that original awareness piece. If you're not aware of these things that are problems in your life, you'll continue on the path that you're in. So taking inventory, hiring coaches, consultants, mentors, asking them to give you direct feedback has been huge.
Do you feel that awareness is something that you've built upon over the years? Do you feel like it takes, like, how often do you have to practice it to fine-tune that awareness, right? Because I think a lot of times in life we wade through life doing the things that it's kind of like we subconsciously, we're not aware of the things we do until maybe someone, one of our friends, one of our loved ones say, hey, like, I've noticed you're doing this. But how is it that you can practice awareness of yourself without outside input to make you aware?
You've got to read and study. It comes from the wisdom of the men and women who have written these books or told these stories. I'm a student of the game like you, right? So I immerse myself, you know, instead of watching the next, you know, episode of blank, it's what's the next resource, what's the next training, what's the next information that I can learn from. I have a great quote that I live by that helps me understand the noise and sift through it. Information is free, education is expensive, experience is priceless. So I don't have a formal education on paper, but my education when it comes to training myself and others is a master's degree. And so that is how I've spent, you know, my adult life, is really learning as much as I can and applying it, right? Information without action is just noise.
Right.
So we can sit in the seminars, we can read the books, but if we don't do something about what we're learning, then it's a waste of time and energy.
Right.
So I love to apply some of those things. You know, I sat in a Buddhist ceremony for 5 days and, you know, learned how to stand as a man. It's masculinity training. One of my favorite books, author named David Data, The Way of the Superior Man. You know, I don't know how aware I was going into that, but coming out of it, I'm more aware, right? Practicing meditation, breath work, Wim Hof, cold, all the things that are now common in today's high achievers. There was a time where none of those existed in my protocols.
Right.
And so, you know, the challenge with becoming aware is you can become too aware, and then you become judgmental. And then we chase perfection.
Right.
And I faced that for a very long time where things weren't perfect, so I adjusted them, and they still weren't perfect. Okay, that's borderline OCD, right? Which
That
most
comes back to
type
balance.
A's, most type A's have, but for me, I can be aware enough to realize when I'm too aware. And then what do you do about that? You just change the pattern.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of waking up at 4 a.m. to do these 10 things and you only did 9 and now you're like, I didn't sleep.
But now you're aware to disrupt that pattern.
Yes,
Comes
absolutely.
back to That's incredible. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And before we close off, if this was your final interview that you ever do, what would be the message that you want to give out to men out there?
Yeah. So let me give one to you first. If this was my final interview and you were the last person, I would say thank you for opening the door, for reaching out, for following your mission, because it's allowed me to have a voice. To the men out there, I would say don't stop, don't quit, right? Show up as the version of you want to be. Maybe not the one you've been living, maybe not the one you were born into, right? But the one that you want to be. Paint that picture and that vision of how you want to see yourself, and then go be that. And I'll add one more, because if my kids are listening to this one day, it would be to never, ever let their own limiting mindset stop them from becoming something that they want to be. Nobody is in our way but ourselves. And I firmly believe in that.
That's true. We're our own competition at most times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.